The first time I realized my son had stolen from me, I was sitting 3 feet away from him at my daughter's dinner table. He was laughing. My wife was smiling at him, and I was staring at a number on my phone that should have been impossible. $14,263. That was all I had left. Not in my checking account. Not in some forgotten savings account. That was what remained of the money I had spent 30 years building for one reason only, to make sure my wife would be cared for after I was gone. My name is Walter Mercer. I was 76 years old, retired after decades of government work, and for the last 2 years, I had been my wife's full-time caregiver. Her name was Marianne. She had been diagnosed with early-onset dementia at 65. Since then, my life had become medication alarms, doctor's appointments, sleepless nights, and whispered prayers beside her bed. I had watched the woman I loved slowly lose pieces of the life we built together. Some mornings, Marianne remembered our 40 years of marriage. Other mornings, she looked at me with frightened eyes and asked why I was in her house. Those moments broke me in places nobody could see. But I kept going, because she needed me, and because I had promised her something on the night we got married. I promised I would never leave her unprotected. That was why I had saved $318,000 in retirement funds. Every overtime check, every postponed vacation, every old car I kept driving instead of replacing. It was all for Marianne. Then our son, Derek, came home. He called me 3 days after her diagnosis. "Dad, you're trying to handle too much alone," he told me. "I'm coming back. We're going to get through this together." I cried after that call. I hadn't cried in years. I thought my son had finally become the man I'd always hoped he would be. Derek moved into an apartment nearby and started coming over constantly. He took Marianne to appointments. He picked up prescriptions. He paid bills. He handled insurance calls. And when I was too exhausted to think, he would put a hand on my shoulder and say, "Dad, let me take care of this." I believed him. That was my mistake. One evening, when Marianne had been awake most of the night, Derek placed a folder in front of me. "Dad, there's something we need to fix." I barely had the strength to look up. He told me that if something happened to me, Marianne could be left without immediate access to our money. Then he showed me paperwork giving him authority to manage our finances. It sounded responsible. It sounded loving. And I was exhausted enough to believe anything that promised me one peaceful night. So I signed. I thought I was giving my son a key to help protect his mother. I didn't realize I had just given him access to everything. 24 months passed. Then came that Sunday dinner. My daughter Rachel had invited us over. Her husband, Evan, was there too. Marianne was having one of her rare good days. She laughed. She recognized everyone. For a few minutes, I almost forgot what dementia had taken from us. Then Evan reached beneath the table and slipped his phone into my hand. I looked at the screen. There was one message. "Dad, don't react. Check your retirement account." My heart started pounding. I opened the account. The balance appeared. $14,263. I stared at it again. Then again. Across the table, Derek laughed at something Rachel had said. He looked completely relaxed, like the loving son I had thanked God for every night. Then another message appeared on Evan's phone. I found something worse. "We need to talk before Derek realizes we know." And suddenly I understood. The missing money wasn't the worst part. Something else was waiting behind it. Something my son had been preparing for months. I didn't ask Evan what he meant. Not there. Not with Derek sitting across the table. Not with Marianne smiling beside him, completely unaware that something inside our family had just shattered. I locked my phone and slipped it into my pocket. Then I looked at Evan. He gave me the smallest nod. That was all. I stood slowly. "I think I need some air." Rachel immediately pushed her chair back. "Dad, are you okay?" "I'm fine." The lie came out smoothly. After 40 years of marriage, 2 children, and a lifetime of learning how to hide fear from the people you love, I had become very good at lying when necessary. Derek stood too. "I'll come with you." My stomach tightened. "No." He stopped. I forced a tired smile. "Just let me breathe for a minute, son." He watched me carefully. Too carefully. Then he smiled. "Of course, Dad." That smile followed me all the way outside. Evan joined me less than a minute later. He didn't speak until we were inside his car. The door shut. The world became quiet. I turned toward him. "Tell me." Evan looked straight ahead. "Before I tell you anything, I need you to promise me something." "What?" "Don't call Derek. Don't confront him. And don't let him know you've checked the account." My hands tightened around my knees. Why? Evan finally looked at me. Because the money is only the beginning. I felt something cold move through my chest. He pulled a folder from the back seat. It wasn't thick, maybe 20 pages. But when he placed it on my lap, it felt heavier than anything I'd ever held. How long have you known? For months. For months. I stared at him. For months, Evan? His expression didn't change. I needed proof. Proof of what? He opened the folder. The first page was a bank statement. Then another. Then another. My retirement account had been losing money for more than a year. Not in one massive withdrawal. That would have been obvious. Instead, Derek had taken smaller amounts. $4,200. Then $3,750. Then $5,100. Different dates. Different amounts. Always separated by enough time to make the pattern difficult to notice. I stared at those numbers until they blurred. How did he get access? You gave him authorization. I closed my eyes. That sentence hurt more than the missing money. Because it was true. I remembered that night. Marianne had been awake until nearly 4 in the morning. She had spent hours asking where our children were, even though Derek had been sitting downstairs. I hadn't slept. I couldn't think. Derek had arrived with coffee and paperwork. Just routine financial authorization, Dad, he'd said. I signed because I trusted him. I signed because I was exhausted. I signed because I thought my son was helping me protect his mother. Evan turned another page. There's more. I opened my eyes. What could possibly be worse than this? Evan hesitated. Then he placed another document in front of me. It was related to Marianne. Her personal savings. The account she had maintained privately for years. The account I had always respected because it was hers. I knew immediately that something was wrong. How much? Evan swallowed. Almost all of it. I couldn't speak. Marianne had saved that money little by little. Birthdays. Small bonuses. Money she received and never spent. She used to say it made her feel safe knowing she had something that belonged only to her. Derek had emptied it. My vision became strangely clear. I could hear the air conditioner. I could hear a car passing on the street. I could even hear my own breathing. But inside me, something was screaming. Does Marianne know? No. I looked at him. Good. The word surprised even me. Evan stared at me. I rubbed my face. She doesn't need to know. Because what would I tell her? That the son she still recognized on her good days had taken the money she had spent decades saving? That the man she still called her good boy had betrayed her while her mind was slowly slipping away? I couldn't do that to her. Not now. Not when she had so little peace left. Then Evan reached into the folder again. This time, he didn't immediately hand me the document. Dad, there's something you need to understand. What? Derek isn't just taking money. My eyes went to his face. What does that mean? Evan finally placed the paper in my hands. It was a note from an attorney. The words were short, but I understood them. Possible conservatorship preparation. I read it twice, then a third time. My son wasn't simply stealing from me. He had apparently been telling people that I was struggling, that I was becoming confused, that caring for Marianne had become too much for me, that I wasn't handling our finances properly. My hands began trembling. He wants them to think I'm incompetent. Evan nodded. If he succeeds, he could gain legal control over your finances. I looked through the windshield. For 2 years, I had believed Derek was helping carry the weight crushing me. Now I understood. He hadn't been carrying my burden. He had been studying it, learning where I was weakest, waiting until I was too tired to fight. And while I was awake at 5 in the morning giving Marianne her medication, my own son had apparently been building a case against me. Then my phone buzzed. Derek. One message. Dad, you looked pale when you left. Are you sure you're okay? I stared at those words. Evan leaned closer. Don't answer. I almost laughed. Not because anything was funny, because the cruelty of it was almost too much to comprehend. My son had stolen from me. He had taken Marianne's savings. He might have been preparing to take legal control of everything we had left. And yet he was still sitting inside Rachel's house, pretending to worry about his exhausted father. I looked at Evan. What do we do? He was silent for a moment. Then he said something I will never forget. We stop him without letting him know we've started. I looked down at the folder. For the first time that night, my grief began changing into something else. Not rage. Not yet. Something colder. Something deliberate. I had spent my entire life protecting my family. Now I had to protect my wife from one of her own children. And the next morning, We were going to make the first move. But what I didn't know was that Derek had already made his own move. And by the time I discovered it, he had placed one final document in front of me. A document carrying my signature. The next morning, I woke before 5. Not because Marianne needed her medication. Not because I heard her moving around. I woke because one thought had been pounding through my head all night. My signature. Evan had told me Derek wasn't only stealing money. He was preparing something. And somewhere in the paperwork Derek had brought me over the last 2 years, there was apparently a document I had signed without understanding what it meant. I got out of bed quietly. Marianne was asleep beside me. For a few seconds, I simply watched her breathe. Her hair had turned almost completely silver. I remembered the woman she had been when we first met. The woman who danced barefoot in our kitchen. The woman who could remember every birthday, every vacation, every embarrassing thing I'd ever said. Now she sometimes forgot my name, but I remembered hers. I would remember for both of us. That was the promise. I went downstairs. At the kitchen table, I opened the old drawer where I kept paperwork. Insurance records, tax documents, medical bills, old photographs. I searched for anything Derek had asked me to sign. Nothing. Then I remembered something. 9 months after Marianne's diagnosis, Derek had arrived early one Tuesday morning. He had coffee in one hand and a stack of papers in the other. "Just maintenance paperwork, Dad," he'd said. Marianne had barely slept the night before. She had spent hours walking through the house, asking me when we were going home. I had finally gotten her back into bed around 4. Derek knew exactly how exhausted I was. And I had signed. I hadn't read everything. I had trusted my son. That memory suddenly felt like a knife. My phone rang. "Evan, I have the attorney's office ready," he said. "How soon?" "As soon as you can get there." I looked toward the stairs. I need to take care of Marianne first. Of course. That was one reason I trusted Evan. He never asked me to choose between justice and my wife. He understood that protecting her came first. I got Marianne dressed, made her breakfast, and gave her the morning medication. She looked at me while I poured her coffee. "Are we going somewhere?" "Just for a little while." "Where?" I smiled. "To make sure everything is okay." She studied my face. Then she reached across the table and touched my hand. "You look tired, Walter." Those 5 words nearly broke me. Because she was right. I was exhausted. But not from what she thought. I was exhausted from discovering that the person I'd trusted most had been quietly destroying everything I was trying to protect. Later that morning, I met Evan at an elder law attorney's office. Her name was Margaret Sloan. She was in her early 60s, spoke softly, and had the unsettling habit of reading documents without reacting to them. Evan gave her the folder. She read, page after page. Bank statements, authorization forms, account changes, then the document with my signature. She stopped. "This is the one." My throat tightened. "What is it?" She turned it toward me. It was a beneficiary change form. I stared at my signature. It was mine. There was no question. My name was written exactly the way I had signed thousands of documents throughout my life. But beneath it was something I had never knowingly agreed to. Derek had changed the beneficiaries on my retirement account. My daughter Rachel was removed. My grandchildren were removed. And Derek had placed himself in their position. I felt my chest tighten. He told me it was routine maintenance. Margaret looked at me. "Did you read it?" "No." "Did you understand what you were signing?" "No." She nodded slowly. "Then we're going to document exactly what happened." I looked at Evan. "What can we do?" Margaret's answer was calm. "First, we revoke every authority Derek has over you and Marianne." My heart began pounding. Today, she continued. "Second, we notify the financial institutions. Third, we preserve every piece of evidence. And fourth, we determine whether the withdrawals and account changes support criminal action." I sat back. For the first time since seeing that balance, I felt something I hadn't felt in days. A tiny amount of control. But Margaret wasn't finished. "There is one more issue." "What?" She folded her hands. "If Derek has been telling relatives or other people that you're becoming incapable of managing your affairs, we need to know exactly what he's been saying." Evan's expression hardened. "He has." Margaret looked at him. "How do you know?" "Because I've heard him." I looked at Evan. He continued. "At family gatherings. In conversations with relatives. He keeps saying Walter is overwhelmed. That taking care of Marianne is affecting his judgment. That he's worried Walter might hurt himself financially." My stomach turned. Derek had been building a story where he was the responsible son, a story where I was an old man who could no longer manage his own life. And if enough people believed it, his theft could eventually look like responsibility. Margaret leaned forward. Then we need to move carefully. I nodded. What does carefully mean? It means you do nothing that alerts him. I understood immediately. No confrontation. No angry phone call. No accusations. Nothing. Derek needed to believe everything was normal. I left the office with copies of the documents, but Margaret kept the originals. Before I left, she stopped me. Walter. I turned. Your son may already suspect that someone is looking into this. My heart sank. Why? Because people who manipulate financial records often monitor the person they're manipulating. Changes in behavior can make them nervous. I thought about Derek's text from the night before. Are you sure you're okay? For the first time, it sounded different. Not concern. Surveillance. I drove home. Derek called before I reached the driveway. I watched his name appear on my screen. I didn't answer. 30 seconds later, he called again. Then came a message. Dad, we need to talk. I stared at it. Another message arrived. Did Evan tell you something? My blood went cold. I stopped breathing for a second. How did he know? I hadn't spoken to Evan in front of him. Nobody had confronted Derek. Nobody had warned him. Yet somehow, my son already knew that something had changed. Then another message appeared. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. I read it twice. The exhaustion disappeared. The fear disappeared. Even the anger disappeared. There was only one thought left. Derek knew. And if he knew, then whatever he had planned next could be much worse than stealing my money. I looked at Marianne sitting quietly in the passenger seat. She smiled at me. Are we home? I took her hand. Yes, sweetheart. Then I looked back at my phone. Because suddenly I understood something terrifying. We weren't waiting to see what Derek would do anymore. We were racing him. And that afternoon, he came to my house carrying a folder. He said it was for Marianne. But when I saw the first page inside, I realized exactly why he was suddenly in such a hurry. He wasn't trying to take our money anymore. He was trying to take control of us. Derek stood on my porch holding the folder against his chest. He smiled when I opened the door. That was the part one couldn't stop thinking about. How easily he smiled. How naturally he could stand in the home I had spent 40 years paying for, beside the woman who had given him everything, and pretend nothing was wrong. Dad, he said. Can I come in? I stepped aside. Of course. Marianne was sitting in the living room watching an old movie. When she saw Derek, her face brightened. There he is. Derek walked straight to her. Hey, Mom. He kissed her forehead. She smiled. For one painful second, I saw the little boy he used to be. The boy who once slept beside Marianne's hospital bed when she was sick. The boy who used to run through this same house looking for me after school. I wanted that boy back. But the man standing in front of me was holding a folder that could determine the rest of our lives. Derek sat down. I've been thinking about you too. I poured myself water. What about us? He opened the folder. With Mom's condition getting worse, we need to start planning ahead. The words sounded reasonable. That was what made them dangerous. He explained that I was under enormous pressure. That caring for Marianne alone was becoming too much. That there were legal arrangements we should consider before something happened to me. I kept my face blank. Inside, I was remembering Margaret's warning. Do nothing that alerts him. So I nodded. You're probably right. Derek looked relieved. Then he slid a document toward me. I've already spoken to someone. This would make things easier. I looked down. It was a draft for legal authority over financial and medical decisions. My fingers went cold. Derek wanted broader control. Over me. Over Marianne. Over whatever remained of our money. Why do you need all this? I asked. He gave me that patient expression. The same expression he had worn 2 years earlier when I was too exhausted to read the first documents he brought me. Dad, you're 76. Mom has dementia. You're exhausted. I'm trying to make sure nobody gets stuck dealing with a disaster later. Nobody. That word stayed with me. Because Derek had spent months creating the disaster himself. I looked at Marianne. She was humming softly with the television. She had no idea. I turned back to him. Let me think about it. His smile disappeared for half a second. Then it returned. Of course. He gathered the papers. I just don't want you making things harder than they need to be. My eyes met his. That sentence again. The same words he'd texted me. I smiled. Neither do I. He stayed for another 20 minutes. He asked about my health. Asked whether I was sleeping. Asked whether I was confused about anything lately. Every question sounded innocent. Together, they sounded like an interrogation. I answered carefully. When he finally left, I watched his car disappear down the street. Then I locked the door. My hands were shaking. Not because I was afraid of Derek. Because I was grieving him. That was the truth nobody tells you about betrayal by your own child. You don't just lose trust. You lose the version of that person you carried inside your heart for decades. I went upstairs and found Marianne folding towels that didn't need folding. She looked at me. Walter? Yes. Is Derek okay? I froze. What makes you ask that? She looked toward the window. He looked worried. I sat beside her. He is worried. About us? Yes. She thought for a moment. Then she took my hand. He was always a good boy. My throat tightened. I couldn't answer. Because Marianne's mind was taking pieces of her past away from her. And somehow, even after everything Derek had done, she was still holding on to the best version of him. I kissed her forehead. Rest, sweetheart. That night, after Marianne fell asleep, I called Evan. He came. I know. I stopped. How? Because Derek called Rachel. My stomach dropped. What did he say? He told her you're becoming forgetful. I closed my eyes. There it was. The story. The one Derek had been building. Evan continued. He said you're overwhelmed. He said you sometimes forget bills and appointments. He said he was worried you might sign something dangerous. I almost laughed. He's describing exactly what he has been doing to me. I know. Silence filled the phone. Then Evan said, there's something else. I waited. Rachel found another account. My eyes opened. What account? An account Derek opened using your information. My heart stopped. Where? I don't know yet, but the bank is tracing it. I sat down. For 2 years, I'd believed the worst thing my son could do was steal money. Now I understood. Money was only the evidence. The real plan was control. Evan told me the attorney had already started the process of revoking Derek's authority, but there was one problem. How long? Until everything is officially processed? Yes. Possibly several days. Several days. I looked toward the bedroom. Marianne was asleep. I thought about every document Derek might still have. Every account he could access. Every person he had spoken to. Every story he had planted about my declining judgment. And then I remembered something. Derek has a key. Evan went silent. To my house? Yes. Does he know you know? No. Good. I stood up. Then we have an advantage. What are you thinking? I looked at the locked front door. For 40 years, I had believed a locked door meant you were safe. But Derek had a key, and I had given it to him. Tomorrow, I said, I want every lock changed. Evan breathed out slowly. Agreed. And I want Margaret to know about the second account. Already on it. I almost smiled. Then Evan said something that made the smile disappear. Walter, there is one more thing. What? We found evidence Derek has been talking to someone about getting you declared financially incapable. My stomach sank. Who? An attorney. I gripped the phone. Are you sure? Yes. I looked around my living room. At the photographs. At Marianne's wedding picture. At the old furniture we'd bought when the children were young. This was my home. My wife's home. Our life. And my son was trying to build a legal cage around us from the inside. I whispered, then we don't wait anymore. Evan asked, what do you want to do? I looked toward the bedroom where Marianne slept. My voice came out quieter than I expected. Everything Derek thinks he controls. I paused. We take back. But neither of us knew that by the following evening, Derek would make one mistake. A mistake so careless that it would give us something we desperately needed. Proof he couldn't explain away. And when that evidence arrived, I finally understood why he'd been so confident all along. The next morning, I changed every lock in the house. Not because I thought Derek would break in. Because I finally understood something that had taken me 2 years to see. The danger had never been outside my home. It had been sitting at my kitchen table. My daughter Rachel arrived just after 8. She looked exhausted. I knew that look. It was the look of someone who had spent the entire night arguing with a truth they desperately wished wasn't true. She put her purse down and stared at me. Dad, I need to tell you something. I nodded. Tell me. She sat across from me. I don't know how to say this. Then don't make it pretty. Her eyes filled immediately. I think Derek has been lying to us for a long time. I felt something break inside me. Not because I hadn't already figured it out, because hearing my daughter say it made everything real. Rachel had defended her brother for years. When Derek made mistakes, she explained them. When he disappeared, she made excuses. When I questioned his choices, she told me he was under pressure. She had spent her entire life believing that being a sister meant protecting him. Now she looked at me like she was ashamed of every excuse she'd ever made. I should have listened to you, she whispered. You didn't know. I knew enough. I reached across the table. Rachel. She shook her head. No, Dad. I knew something was wrong. Then she told me what she had discovered. 2 months earlier, Derek had contacted her about our finances. He hadn't asked directly for money. He had asked questions. How much did I have saved? Was the house completely paid off? Did Marianne still have her own accounts? What would happen if something happened to me? Rachel thought he was simply being responsible, until she started noticing how often he asked about my health. Whether I was forgetting things, whether I was sleeping, whether I was taking medication, whether I seemed confused. He wasn't asking because he cared. He was collecting information. Then Rachel reached into her purse. She pulled out a small envelope. I found this in my house. I opened it. Inside was a photocopy of an email. My eyes moved across the page, then stopped. It was from Derek. He had written to someone about me. The message described me as increasingly overwhelmed and financially irresponsible. It said I was struggling to manage Marianne's care. It suggested that someone might eventually need to intervene. I read it twice. Then I looked at Rachel. When did he send this? 6 months ago. 6 months. I thought about what my life looked like 6 months earlier. Marianne had started wandering at night. I had been sleeping in a chair beside the bedroom door because I was terrified she'd walk outside. One morning, I found her standing in the kitchen at 4:30, holding a coat and asking why we hadn't picked up the children from school. Our children were grown. One had children of her own. But Marianne didn't know that anymore. And while I was trying to hold her world together, Derek was telling people I couldn't hold mine. My hands trembled. Rachel noticed. Dad, I'm okay. No, you're not. I looked at her. She started crying. I should have seen it. I stood and hugged her. For several seconds, neither of us said anything. Then she whispered against my shoulder. Mom still loves him. I closed my eyes. I know. She doesn't know. I know. And she may never know. That was the cruelest part. Marianne's illness was protecting Derek from the one person whose disappointment might have destroyed him. Her mind was losing the ability to remember his betrayal. But mine wasn't, and neither was Rachel's. Later that morning, Margaret called. Her voice was calm. Walter, we've received confirmation from the bank. I sat down. About the second account? Yes. What did they find? She paused. The account was opened using your personal information. But there's something more important. I waited. Your son's name is not listed as the primary owner. My stomach tightened. Then whose name is on it? That's what we're trying to determine. I looked at Rachel. She had gone completely still. Margaret continued. The account received several transfers that correspond almost exactly with withdrawals from your retirement account. My blood ran cold. So he moved the money there. Possibly. We don't want to make conclusions before the bank completes its review. I understood. Evidence mattered. Not suspicion. Not anger. Evidence. How much? Approximately $61,000 that we can currently trace. Rachel covered her mouth. I stared at the wall. $61,000. Money that had been taken from my retirement. Money that was supposed to keep Marianne safe. Then Margaret said something that changed everything. Walter, there's another transfer we haven't been able to explain. What transfer? $7,400. Where did it go? We're still tracing it. I stood. Margaret, I need to know. I understand. Her voice became more serious. There's something else. Derek has apparently been attempting to move forward with the legal process we discussed. My heart started pounding. The conservatorship? Yes. How soon? Very soon, if we don't act. I looked at Rachel. She was already reaching for her phone. Can we stop it? Yes. But we need to move quickly. I thought about Derek sitting in my living room 2 days earlier. His calm voice. His gentle smile. His questions about whether I was sleeping. He wasn't checking on me. He was checking whether I was still capable of defending myself. I suddenly remembered the folder he had brought. The document he'd wanted me to sign. And I remembered something else. A tiny detail. There had been a second page behind it. I hadn't read it. I had assumed it was part of the same paperwork. I looked at Rachel. Did you take pictures of the folder Derek brought? She frowned. No. I grabbed my phone. Evan might have. I called him. He answered immediately. Walter? Do you still have copies of everything Derek brought? Yes. Check the folder from 2 days ago. Silence. Then I heard papers moving. Why? Just check it. Another pause. Then Evan's voice changed. Walter. What? I found something. My heart began pounding. What is it? I don't think this was meant for you to see. I gripped the phone. What does it say? He didn't answer immediately. Then he read the heading. And suddenly, the room seemed to become smaller. Because the document wasn't about helping Marianne. It wasn't even about managing my finances. It was a draft statement describing me as incapable of managing my own affairs. But that wasn't the worst part. At the bottom was a section listing people who could potentially testify about my supposed decline. And one of the names on that list was someone I had trusted for years. Someone who had watched me care for Marianne. Someone who had seen exactly how exhausted I was. I looked at Rachel. She whispered, "Who?" I couldn't answer. Because I was staring at the name. And for the first time, I realized Derek hadn't built this plan alone. He had help. And whoever was helping him had been close enough to my family to know exactly where to strike. Evan didn't say the name immediately. He just breathed into the phone. That silence told me enough. Evan. I'm here. Who is it? Another pause. Then he said, Dr. Harold Vance. I stopped moving. Dr. Vance had been Marianne's primary physician for almost a year. He had watched me bring her to appointments when she couldn't remember why she was there. He had seen me arrive exhausted, carrying medication lists, notebooks, and questions I'd written down at 3 a.m. He had told me more than once that I was doing everything I could for her. And now Derek had apparently listed him as someone who could testify that I was no longer capable of managing my affairs. Rachel stared at me. Dad. I put the phone on speaker. Evan continued. The document doesn't say he's agreed to testify. It says Derek intends to contact him. I exhaled. That distinction mattered. Margaret joined the call a few minutes later. When she heard the details, her tone became very serious. Walter, do not contact Dr. Vance about this yourself. Why? Because we need to preserve everything exactly as it is. If Derek is building a case around your mental capacity, we don't want anyone accusing you of influencing witnesses. I almost laughed. Influencing witnesses. My son was trying to convince people I was incapable of managing my own life, and I had to be careful not to look like I was defending myself too aggressively. Then what do we do? Margaret answered immediately. We document. We revoke. We notify every institution. And we let the evidence speak. That became our plan. By noon, Derek's authority over my accounts was being formally challenged. By afternoon, the bank had placed additional safeguards on the remaining funds. And by evening, Margaret had begun reviewing every document Derek had ever asked me to sign. But there was still one problem. The missing money. We needed to know exactly where it had gone. Evan worked late that night. Rachel stayed at my house with Marianne, while I sat in the kitchen staring at an untouched cup of coffee. Around 11, my phone rang. Evan. I answered immediately. Tell me. We traced the 7,400. My heart started beating faster. Where? An account belonging to someone named Caleb Mercer. I frowned. Who is that? That's the problem. I searched my memory. Nothing. Then Rachel heard the name and suddenly looked at me. Caleb? I turned. You know him? She nodded slowly. He's Derek's business partner. The room went silent. I stood. Business partner? Dad, Derek mentioned him a few times. He runs some kind of consulting company. I closed my eyes. So there was another person. Someone outside the family. Someone receiving money that had originated in my retirement account. I asked Evan, how much went to Caleb? We've confirmed 7,400 so far. Only once. No. My stomach tightened. How many times? 3. I couldn't speak. Evan continued. The total is just over $22,000. Rachel's hand went to her mouth. I stared at the kitchen table. $22,000. Then Evan said something even worse. The transfers were labeled as business reimbursements. I looked up. Reimbursements for what? That's what we're trying to determine. I knew then that Derek hadn't simply been taking money and spending it. He had been disguising where it went. Planning. Organizing. Creating explanations. The same careful behavior I'd once mistaken for maturity. My own son had taken the discipline I'd tried to teach him and turned it into a weapon. That night, I barely slept. At 4:40 in the morning, I was sitting beside Marianne's bed. She woke and looked at me. "Why are you awake?" "Couldn't sleep." She reached for my hand. I took it. Her fingers felt so small. "Are you worried?" I looked at her. There were moments when dementia made Marianne seem like a stranger. But there were other moments when she said something so perfectly clear that I remembered exactly who she had always been. "Yes," I admitted. She squeezed my hand. "About me?" I shook my head. "Never about you." She stared at me for several seconds. Then she whispered, "Then don't let them take our home." My entire body went still. "What did you say?" She blinked. "Home." I leaned closer. "Marianne, what did you mean?" She looked confused. Then the moment disappeared. "Did we lock the back door?" I sat there staring at her. Maybe it had meant nothing. Maybe she had simply been confused. But those words stayed with me. Don't let them take our home. The next morning, Margaret called. "Walter, I need you to come in." "Why?" "We found something in the property records." My stomach dropped. "What?" "Your house." I gripped the phone. "What about it?" There was a long silence. Then Margaret said, "Derek apparently attempted to use the house as collateral for a private loan." I couldn't breathe. "Our house is paid off." "I know." "Then how could he?" "Your power of attorney." I sat down. He had tried to borrow against the home where Marianne and I had raised our children. The home she had chosen decades ago. The home where our grandchildren had taken their first steps. The home I had spent my entire life protecting. And Derek had apparently tried to turn it into collateral. I asked the only question that mattered. Did he succeed? No. I closed my eyes. Relief hit me so hard my shoulders dropped. Then Margaret added, "But there's something else." I opened my eyes. "What?" "The loan application contains a statement about your mental condition." My heart stopped. "What statement?" "According to the application, you were supposedly no longer capable of making independent financial decisions." I stared into nothing. Derek wasn't just stealing. He wasn't just preparing a conservatorship. He had been creating a paper trail. Every action connected to the same story. I was old. I was exhausted. I was confused. I was incapable. And he was the responsible son stepping in to save me. Except now we had evidence showing the story was manufactured. I asked Margaret, "Can we prove he did this?" "We're getting there." "How close?" "Close enough that I think you should stop thinking about confronting your son." I almost smiled. I wasn't planning to. Good. Because I want him to keep believing everything is normal. Margaret went quiet. Then she understood. "Walter, I spent 2 years believing Derek was protecting my family." I looked at Marianne's bedroom door. "Let him believe I'm still trusting him." My voice became steady. "Because if he thinks we've discovered everything, he'll stop making mistakes." Margaret didn't argue. She simply said, "Then we wait." But we didn't have to wait long. That afternoon, Derek came to the house again. And this time, he didn't bring food. He didn't ask about Marianne. He didn't ask how I was sleeping. He walked through the front door and placed a single envelope on my kitchen table. "Dad," he said, "I need you to sign this today." I looked at the envelope, then at my son. "What's it for?" His expression changed. For the first time since this nightmare began, Derek didn't look like the loving son I'd known. He looked impatient. "Just sign it." I stared at him. "No." His face went completely still. I had never refused him like that. He slowly leaned toward me. "Dad, I don't think you understand what I'm trying to do for you." I looked him directly in the eyes. "Maybe I understand more than you think." For a second, neither of us moved. Then Derek picked up the envelope. His voice dropped. "If you don't cooperate, things are going to get very difficult." He walked out. I watched the door close behind him. And I knew. The performance was over. Derek wasn't pretending to be concerned anymore. He was threatening me. But he had made one mistake. He had threatened me inside my own house. And Evan had already warned me that the new security system was recording everything. For the first time, Derek had given us exactly what we'd been waiting for. His own voice. And this time, there would be no document he could twist, no story he could rewrite, and no excuse that could explain what he had just said. I didn't move after Derek left. I just stared at the front door. His last words kept repeating inside my head. Things are going to get very difficult. For 2 years, I had mistaken Derek's calm voice for kindness. Now I understood it. He wasn't asking me to cooperate. He was warning me. I waited until his car disappeared, then called Evan. Did you get it? His answer came immediately. Every word. I closed my eyes. The security system had captured the conversation clearly. Derek had walked into my home believing he was still in control. He hadn't realized that the moment he threatened me, he had handed us another piece of evidence. Send it to Margaret, I said. Already done. And the cameras? Everything from the last 30 days is backed up. I sat down. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to breathe. But Evan wasn't celebrating. Walter, there's something else. Of course there was. What now? We checked the loan application against the other records. And Derek didn't submit it alone. My stomach tightened. Caleb? Yes. I stared at the kitchen wall. So the business partner wasn't just receiving money. He was helping Derek move it. But Evan wasn't finished. There are payments between Caleb and the person Derek listed as a potential witness. I felt a chill move through me. Dr. Vance? No. Then who? Evan gave me the name. I knew it immediately. Martha Ellison, Marianne's former home care coordinator. For almost a year, Martha had visited our house twice a week. She had seen everything. She had seen me wake Marianne for medication. She had seen me cook for her. She had seen me clean up after her worst days. She had even seen me sleep in a chair beside the bedroom, because Marianne sometimes wandered at night. And Derek had apparently been talking to her. I couldn't understand it. Why would Martha help him? Maybe she isn't. I stopped. What do you mean? We haven't confirmed that she knew what the payments were connected to. That distinction mattered. Evan wasn't willing to accuse anyone without proof. Neither was I. But there was something I did know. Derek had built his plan by surrounding himself with people who knew how exhausted I was. He didn't need to invent every detail. He simply needed to tell the truth about my exhaustion and lie about its cause. I was tired. I forgot things sometimes. I had missed a bill once. I had fallen asleep sitting upright. Those things were real. But Derek had taken every weakness created by caring for Marianne and turned it into evidence against me. That was the part one could never forgive. Not the money. Not even the attempted loan against my house. It was the fact that he had watched his mother become vulnerable and then used my love for her as a weapon against me. That evening, Rachel came over. She found me sitting beside Marianne. Dad. I looked up. She's sleeping. Rachel lowered her voice. How are you? I almost gave her the usual answer. Fine. Instead, I said, I'm tired. She sat beside me. Then she whispered, I don't think I'll ever forgive him. I looked at my daughter. You don't have to decide that today. But what he did. I know. She started crying. I spent years defending him. I reached for her hand. That's what families do sometimes. No, Dad. She wiped her face. That's what people do when they love someone more than they love the truth. That sentence stayed with me. Because Rachel had finally stopped protecting her brother. Not because she hated him. Because she finally understood what protecting him had cost everyone else. The next morning, Margaret called. We're ready. I sat straight. Ready for what? To file everything. She explained that the financial institutions had received the documents. Derek's authority was being revoked. The suspicious transfers had been flagged. The attempted loan against the house had been documented. The recording of Derek's threat had been preserved. And the evidence concerning the conservatorship plan was being prepared. But Margaret said there was still one thing we needed. His response. What do you mean? If we confront him now, he'll have an opportunity to claim everything was a misunderstanding. I understood. We needed him to keep talking. We needed him to explain himself. And that meant I had to do something I never thought I could. I had to invite my son to dinner. Not because I wanted him there. Because I wanted him comfortable. So I called him. He answered on the second ring. Dad. Hey son. His voice immediately softened. How are you feeling? I looked at the camera recording light above the doorway. Better. Good. I've been thinking. About what? About that paperwork. Silence. I could almost hear him calculating. What about it? I think you're right. Another pause. About what? Maybe I do need help. Derek's voice changed. Not much. Just enough. That's all I've been trying to tell you. I smiled. Come over Sunday. For dinner? Yes. Just us. I looked toward the living room. No. Everyone. His breathing changed. Everyone. Rachel. Evan. You. Me. Marianne. He was silent. Then he said, Sure, Dad. Bring something nice. I will. We ended the call. I sat there for a long time. Evan called 5 minutes later. Did he agree? Yes. Are you sure you want to do this? I looked at Marianne. She was sitting by the window, looking through an old photo album. Yes. Why? I watched her fingers move across a photograph of our family when the children were young. Because I don't want Derek's last memory of this family to be a courtroom. Evan said nothing. I continued. I want him to sit at the same table where he grew up. I swallowed. I want him to look at his mother. And then, I looked toward the front door. Then we let the truth walk in. Sunday arrived. By 6 o'clock, the house was ready. Rachel and Evan arrived first. Marianne wore the blue dress she had always loved. She looked beautiful. For one brief moment, she looked exactly like the woman I married. Then the doorbell rang. Rachel froze. Evan stood. I put my hand on his shoulder. Stay. The bell rang again. I walked toward the door. My heart was beating hard enough to hurt. I opened it. Derek stood there holding an expensive bottle of wine. He smiled. Dad. I stepped aside. Come in, son. He walked into the house like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't stolen from us. Like he hadn't tried to take control of our lives. Like he hadn't threatened me. He placed the bottle on the table and kissed Marianne. She smiled warmly. My boy. Derek looked at her. Then at me. For 1 second, I saw something in his eyes. Fear. It vanished almost instantly. We sat down for dinner. Derek started talking. He laughed. He told stories. He refilled glasses. He played the loving son perfectly. And then halfway through dinner, he leaned toward me. So Dad. His voice was gentle. Did you bring the paperwork I asked for? I looked at him. Rachel stopped eating. Evan's hand went still. Marianne continued smiling, unaware. I picked up my glass. Which paperwork? Derek's smile disappeared. For the first time, he realized something was wrong. Then there was a knock at the front door. 3 slow knocks. Derek looked toward the hallway. I put my glass down. I'll get it. And when I opened that door, I wasn't looking at my son's future anymore. I was looking at the people who had come to decide it. 3 knocks. Slow. Calm. Almost polite. I opened the front door. 2 investigators stood on the porch. Neither looked angry. Neither needed to. They carried themselves with the quiet confidence of people who already knew why they were there. Behind me, I heard Derek's chair move. Dad. I stepped aside. Come in. The investigators entered. Derek stood at the dining table. His face changed the instant he saw them. First confusion. Then recognition. Then something I had been waiting weeks to see. Fear. He looked at me. Then Rachel. Then Evan. Then back toward the front door. Searching. Calculating. Looking for an explanation. There wasn't one. One investigator introduced himself as Agent Nolan Pierce. His partner was Detective Marcus Reed. Derek Mercer? Derek swallowed. Yes. We need to speak with you. His eyes immediately came to me. Dad, what's this? I didn't answer. He looked at Rachel. Rachel? My daughter stood slowly. She was crying, but she didn't hide it. Derek stared at her. What did you do? Rachel's face tightened. What did I do? You called them? No. She wiped her cheek. You did this. Derek shook his head. You don't understand. Rachel's voice broke. No. I understand now. The room went silent. Marianne was still sitting at the table. She looked from face to face. Confused. Then she looked at Derek. My boy. Derek turned toward her. His expression softened instantly. Mom, it's okay. And for a moment, I hated myself for what was happening. Because Marianne didn't understand. She didn't know that the son she loved had been stealing from us. She didn't know that he'd tried to take control of our finances. She didn't know he'd tried to make people believe her husband was incapable of managing his own life. All she knew was that her son was standing in front of her. And she loved him. Derek reached for her hand. Then Detective Reed spoke. Mr. Mercer, please step away from the table. Derek slowly released Marianne's hand. He looked at me. Dad, tell them. I said nothing. Tell them this is a misunderstanding. Still nothing. His voice became desperate. Dad. I looked directly at my son. I gave you everything because I trusted you. His face tightened. I was helping you. No. My voice was quiet. You were helping yourself. Derek shook his head. You don't know what you're talking about. I looked toward Evan. He opened the folder. Then let's talk about the withdrawals. Derek froze. Evan placed copies on the table. 38 separate transactions. Derek's eyes moved across the papers. That's not. Retirement funds, Evan continued. Your father's account. Derek looked at me. I told you I was managing his finances. You were. I swallowed. That was the problem. Detective Reed placed another document on the table. The secondary account. Derek's face went pale. Then came the attempted loan against the house. Then the transfers to Caleb. Then the beneficiary change. One document after another. Derek stopped defending himself. He simply stared. Finally, he looked at me. Dad, I can explain. I nodded. Then explain. He opened his mouth. Nothing came out, because there are some lies that work beautifully when you tell them one at a time. But when every lie is placed beside the next one, the whole structure collapses. Detective Reed turned toward him. You are being investigated for financial exploitation, fraud, and unauthorized financial transactions. Derek's breathing became uneven. He looked at me. You're really doing this to me? That question almost destroyed me. Not because I felt guilty. Because he still didn't understand. He was asking why I was hurting him. He wasn't asking why he had hurt us. Rachel finally spoke. No, Derek. Her voice was barely above a whisper. You did this to yourself. Derek looked at her. You knew. I know everything now. His face crumpled. For a second, I saw my little boy again. And then he said something that broke whatever was left of that memory. I needed the money. I stared at him. Why? He looked down. I had debts. I closed my eyes. Then you should have asked. I couldn't. Why? Because you'd say no. The room became completely silent. I looked at the man I had raised. You knew I would say no. He didn't answer. That's why you stole it. Still nothing. I felt something inside me settle. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Just finality. I turned toward Marianne. She was looking at me. Walter? Yes, sweetheart. Why is everyone upset? I walked over and took her hand. Because sometimes people make choices that hurt the people who love them. She looked toward Derek. Then back at me. Is he leaving? My throat tightened. Yes. She frowned. Where is he going? I looked at my son. For one last moment, our eyes met. I don't know. Derek was escorted toward the door. Before he left, he turned around. Dad. I didn't move. Please. That single word carried years inside it. My son's childhood. His first day of school. The first time he called me Dad. His graduation. Every Christmas. Every mistake I'd forgiven. Every time I'd convinced myself that loving someone meant giving them another chance. But I also thought about Marianne. About the $318,000 I had saved for her. About the nights I'd sat beside her bed. About the money she'd saved privately. About the home he'd tried to put at risk. And about the legal cage he'd been building around me while pretending to protect me. I shook my head. I'm sorry, Derek. His eyes filled. But I continued. I'm not sorry you're finally facing what you did. He looked at me for several seconds. Then he walked out. The door closed. Marianne lifted her hand. She waved toward it. Good night, sweetheart. Derek couldn't hear her anymore. But I did. And somehow that was worse. Months later, the legal process was still moving. The money wasn't recovered all at once. Some came back. Some didn't. There were hearings, paperwork, investigations, and long conversations with attorneys. But Margaret protected what remained. The house stayed ours. Marianne's care was secured. And Rachel restored the place in my life that Derek had nearly destroyed. One afternoon, I sat beside Marianne in the garden. She didn't remember the investigation. She didn't remember the stolen money. She didn't remember what Derek had done. She looked at me and smiled. Have we always lived here? I smiled back. Almost 40 years. She looked at the house. It's beautiful. It is. She leaned her head against my shoulder. Then she whispered, You kept your promise. I couldn't breathe. I looked at her. What promise? She smiled. The one you made me. Maybe she remembered. Maybe she didn't. I decided it didn't matter. Because for 40 years, I had built a wall around my family. I thought that wall was made of money, sacrifice, paperwork, and careful planning. I was wrong. The real protection wasn't the money. It wasn't the house. It wasn't even the legal documents. It was the people who stayed when staying became difficult. Rachel stayed. Evan stayed. And when everything I thought I could trust collapsed, they helped me stand again. Derek was my son. That will always be true. But being my son did not give him the right to destroy his mother. It did not give him the right to steal the future I had sacrificed my life to protect. And it certainly did not give him the right to decide whether I was capable of protecting myself. I learned something in those months. Justice doesn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it feels like grief. Sometimes you win the case and still lose the person you thought your child would become. Sometimes the money comes back, but the trust doesn't. And sometimes forgiveness isn't about opening the door again. Sometimes forgiveness means closing the door without hatred, then walking away from it. Marianne squeezed my hand. I looked down. Her eyes were peaceful. For once, there was no fear in them. No confusion. Just warmth. I kissed her forehead. And I realized something. Derek had spent 2 years trying to take everything from us. But he had failed at the one thing that mattered most. He couldn't take the love that remained. He couldn't take the family members who chose the truth. And he couldn't take the promise I had made to my wife. I had promised Marianne that I would protect her. I kept that promise, even when the person I had to protect her from was our own son.